The rain was falling over the broken city. Old towers stood like skeletons in the mist. The streets were empty, covered in dust, metal, and strange glowing plants. The air was heavy with silence, broken only by the sound of dripping water. A man walked slowly through the ruins. He was human, strong but tired, his face marked by scars. He carried a knife in one hand and a bow on his back. His boots splashed in the shallow puddles as he moved carefully. He had seen many battles, and he had lost many things. For him, this alien world was only another battlefield. But today, something felt different. As he moved between the ruins, he felt that someone was watching. He turned his head, listening. The rain grew louder, and the wind carried whispers through the empty buildings. He raised his knife, ready to fight, but then he saw a small figure standing in the shadows. It was a child. She looked small and fragile, her skin glowing faintly under the rain. Her large eyes shined with tears. She stepped forward, her voice shaking. "Please, mighty human, my mother was taken by enemies, help save her." The human froze. He had expected a soldier, a monster, or a trap. But what he saw was only a young alien girl, desperate and afraid. Her hands trembled as she reached out to him. Her clothes were torn, her face wet with rain and sorrow. She looked so innocent, yet her voice carried deep pain. For a moment, he did not answer. He remembered the faces of children he could not save before. He remembered the family he had lost long ago. The weight of his past pressed on his heart. He looked down at the girl, and his knife lowered. "Why me?" he asked in a rough voice. "There are many others. Why come to me?" The girl shook her head quickly. "No one else will help. They are afraid. Only you can fight them. Only you are strong." Her words echoed in the silent ruins. The human felt a strange pull inside him. He had walked alone for years, carrying only anger and memories. But now, this child was asking for his strength. It was not for gold, not for glory, but for a mother's life. He stepped closer, kneeling to meet her eyes. "Who are these enemies?" he asked. Her lips shook as she answered. "They are hunters, cruel ones. They take my people and chain them. They took my mother to the fortress in the Black Valley. If you do not help, she will never return." Her small voice broke, and she began to cry. The man clenched his jaw. He hated enemies who preyed on the weak. He hated chains and prisons. He looked at the child, and in her tears he saw the truth. This was not a trick. This was real. The rain poured harder, washing the dust from his armor. He stood tall again, looking around the ruins. Somewhere in the distance, he saw movement, dark shadows slipping between broken towers. The enemies were near. He felt the danger rising. The child clung to his sleeve, whispering, "Please, don't leave me." His heart, long cold, began to burn again. He looked down at her and gave a short nod. "All right, child," he said. "I will help you, but you must stay close to me." Her eyes widened with hope. "You will save her?" she asked, almost not believing. "I will try," he answered, his voice heavy but strong. At that moment, thunder rolled across the sky. The ground trembled, as if warning of battles to come. The man knew this was no simple task. He would face an army. He would face death again. But deep inside, he felt something. Awaken, a reason to fight once more. The girl held his hand tightly as they moved away from the ruins. The city faded behind them, swallowed by rain and silence. The path ahead was dark, full of unknown dangers, but neither of them looked back. One with courage, the other with desperate hope. Together, they walked into the storm, and the story of their battle had just begun. The storm followed them as they left the ruins. The night was heavy, and the ground was slippery with mud. The human walked first, his steps strong and careful. Behind him the alien child followed, holding his hand tightly, her small fingers gripped with fear, but also with hope. He did not speak at first. His mind was full of memories. He had fought in many battles. He had seen men, women, and children die. He had buried friends, and he had lost his family long ago. For years he walked alone, carrying only his weapons and his scars. Why should he fight again? He asked himself. Why should he risk his life for someone he did not know? But when he looked at the girl, he saw something he could not ignore. Her eyes, wide and shining in the dark, were filled with trust. Trust in him, a stranger, a human among aliens. She was so small, yet she believed he could do the impossible. He felt the weight of her belief pressing on his heart. They stopped. Under a broken arch of stone, the human started a small fire, its glow pushing away the cold rain. The child sat close to the flames, shivering. Her clothes were wet, her face pale. The man took off his worn cloak and wrapped it around her. For a moment, she looked up at him with surprise. No words were spoken, but he saw her gratitude. When the fire grew strong, he asked quietly, "Tell me, child, why do you call me mighty human? I am only a man, nothing more." The girl shook her head, her voice trembling. "No, you are more. My people tell stories. They say humans are strong. They say you never give up. You fight until the end. That is why I came to you. Because you can do what others fear." Her words sank deep into him. Once, long ago, he had been called a hero. Once, people had looked to him with the same hope. But war had taken that away, and he had become only a shadow. Now this child was asking him to rise again. He stared into the fire, the flames dancing. In his tired eyes, "Your enemies," he said slowly. "Who are they really? What do they want?" The girl lowered her head, whispering, "They are called the Iron Hunters. They came from the sky. They take my people to build their armies. They make us slaves, and those who resist are killed. My mother tried to protect me, but they took her. I ran, and I found you." The human clenched his fists. He hated the sound of chains, the thought of slavery. He had seen too many lives destroyed by men who thought themselves masters. His heart grew heavy with anger, but he did not let the girl see it. Instead, he asked, "And where is this fortress?" The child raised a small hand and pointed east, beyond the Black Valley, under the mountain that smokes. "That is where they keep her." The man looked into the dark horizon. He could almost see the shadow of the mountain through the rain. He knew it would be a long and deadly path. The fortress would be filled with guards, traps, and machines of war. To go there was to walk into the jaws of death, but to turn away was to abandon the child. And something inside him would not allow that. As the fire cracked, the man remembered his own daughter. She had once sat beside him like this, small and full of trust. He had failed to protect her, and that wound never healed. Now fate placed another child in his care. He felt that maybe this was his chance, not to erase the past, but to honor it. He looked down at the girl, who was now sleeping beside the fire. Her small face was calm for the first time since he had seen her. He placed more wood on the flames and whispered to himself, "All right, little one, I will take you to your mother. I will fight for her, and for you." The night passed slowly, filled with distant thunder. Shadows moved in the ruins around them, but none came close. The man stayed awake, knife in hand, watching the darkness. When dawn finally came, the sky burned red with rising light. The child opened her eyes, hope shining once again. The human stood tall, pulling his cloak tight. "Come," he said, his voice steady. "We have a long road ahead." And so they walked, leaving the fire behind. The valley of shadows waited for them. The fortress of the Iron Hunters stood beyond. Every step they took was a step toward danger, but also a step toward hope. The man did not know if he would survive, but for the first time in years, he felt alive again. The morning sun was weak behind heavy clouds. The earth was wet and dark from last night's storm. The human walked with steady steps, the child close beside him. Her small hand never let go of his cloak. Every sound of the wild world made her flinch, but his tall figure gave her courage. The land around them was broken and strange. Ruins of ancient towers leaned like dying giants. Plants glowed with pale light, their roots twisting over black stone. Insects the size of hands crawled on the walls, clicking their hard shells. The air smelled of smoke and ash, as if the earth itself was wounded. They moved carefully, following hidden paths between fallen stones. The man's sharp eyes scanned every shadow. His ears caught the faintest noise. He knew they were being watched. Somewhere out there, the iron hunter searched, but he said nothing to the child. She had enough fear already. At midday they reached a broken bridge over a deep canyon. The river below roared like thunder. The bridge was old, made of cracked metal and stone. The human tested it with one heavy boot. It shook but did not fall. He held the child's hand and led her across slowly. Each step echoed against the canyon walls. Halfway through, a scream rose from above. Dark shapes leaped from the cliffs, creatures with long claws and pale skin. Their eyes burned red as they fell upon the bridge. The child cried out, but the man pushed her behind him. His knife flashed in his hand. The first creature landed near him. Slashing with claws, he moved fast, cutting deep into its chest. It shrieked and fell into the river below. Two more came, teeth sharp like blades. The man fought with silent fury. His knife struck, his fists smashed, his boots kicked. The creature screamed and tumbled off the bridge. But the old stones cracked under their weight. The bridge shook and split. The man grabbed the child and leaped to the far side. Behind them the bridge collapsed into the river. The canyon swallowed it whole. The child clung to him, trembling, her eyes wide with terror. "Will they follow us?" she asked in a whisper. He shook his head, wiping blood from his blade. "No, they are gone," he said, though his eyes still scanned the cliffs. She nodded slowly, trying to believe. They moved on. Deeper into the land of shadows, the forest they entered was alive with strange light. Trees as tall as towers glowed with green veins. Mist curled around their roots, hiding shapes that moved in silence. The human walked ahead, every sense alert. The girl followed, whispering softly, as if afraid the forest could hear. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the crunch of leaves underfoot. The man found tracks on the ground, heavy boots pressed deep into the mud. He touched the prints with his hand, his jaw tightening. The iron hunters had come this way. The girl saw his expression and asked, "Is it them?" He nodded once. "Yes, they are close." Fear filled her small face, but she stood tall. "I am not afraid, if you are here," she said quietly, for the first time in years. The man felt the weight of trust again. It was heavy, but it gave him strength. He placed a hand on her shoulder and guided her forward. As the light faded, they reached the edge of the forest. Ahead lay the black valley. The ground dipped low, filled with smoke and ash. In the distance, flames burned like eyes in the dark. Metal towers rose from the earth, sharp and cruel. The fortress of the iron hunters stood far away, its walls glowing red with fire. The sight made the child gasp, her knees shaking. "That is where she is," she whispered. "My mother is inside." The man's eyes narrowed. The fortress looked impossible to reach. Guards moved along the walls, machines hummed with power, but his heart had already chosen. He could not turn back now. He had promised her, and a human promise was iron. They stopped for the night on a high ridge. The man built a small fire hidden between stones. The child ate a little bread, then curled up to sleep beside him. He sat awake, staring at the fortress far below. His mind was sharp with questions. How many guards? What weapons they carried? How strong the walls were? His hand rested on the knife by his side. The fight ahead would test every ounce of his strength. But deep inside, he felt a fire that had long been silent. The child had lit it again. The night grew darker, filled with the sounds of distant drums. The iron hunters sang their cruel songs inside the fortress. The human listened, his face calm but his eyes fierce. Tomorrow, he thought, the real journey would begin. Tomorrow, he would face the hunters, and tomorrow, he would learn if he still deserved the name mighty human. **. The black valley stretched wide before them. Ash and smoke drifted like ghosts across the ground. Every step echoed with the crunch of burned stone. The sky above was filled with red clouds, glowing as if fire lived inside them. The air was heavy, carrying the sound of distant machines. The child walked close to the human, her eyes locked. On the fortress far away, its walls were sharp, tall, and cruel. Built from black iron, flames burned along its towers, and bright lights scanned the valley. Shadows of hunters moved along the walls, their armor gleaming in the firelight. The fortress looked alive, like a monster watching everything. The human stopped at the edge of a broken cliff. He studied the stronghold with eyes hardened by war. He counted the guards, marked the watchtowers, and followed the movement of patrols. Every detail burned into his memory. The girl whispered, "My mother is in there." Her voice was thin, trembling, but filled with desperate hope. He placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice steady. "I see her prison, but first we must find a way inside." They waited until the valley grew darker. The fortress glowed brighter under the night sky. Its gates opened and closed as hunters rode out on machines with glowing eyes. The sound of engines shook the ground. The child pressed close to the man, afraid the noise would bring them, but the human did not move. He watched, silent as stone. Hours passed, the wind carrying sparks from the fortress fires. Then he spoke in a low voice. "There is no easy path, but there is a way. The hunters guard their gates, but their walls have cracks. A man with patience and shadow can pass through." The girl looked at him with wide eyes. "Can you do it?" she asked. He did not answer with words, only gave a firm nod. The climb down the cliff was long and dangerous. Sharp rocks cut at his hands, and loose stones slid under his boots. The child followed carefully, holding tight to his cloak. When they reached the valley floor, the heat of the fortress burned stronger. Every breath was thick with smoke. The ground trembled under the heavy steps of machines inside. They crawled between broken stones and ash dunes. The human moved like a shadow, every muscle trained to silence. The girl followed, small and quick, her breath shaking but controlled. Closer and closer they came, until the walls of black iron rose above them. The fortress towered, its size crushing the spirit. But the man's eyes only grew sharper. He touched the wall, feeling the heat of metal. Then he saw it, a narrow crack near the base, too small for soldiers, but just enough for him. He turned to the girl, whispering, "You cannot come inside. It is too dangerous. Wait here, stay hidden. Do not move until I return." Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded bravely. "I will wait, but please, bring her back." He gave her one last look, then slid into the crack. The iron scraped his armor. The darkness swallowed him. The fortress had claimed him. Inside, the air was worse. It smelled of oil, fire, and blood. The walls echoed with the march of boots and the hiss of machines. The human crouched low, moving through shadows. Every sound could bring death, but he was calm. He had walked in enemy places before. He knew how to become invisible, through narrow halls and broken grates. He moved. He saw cages, filled with weak and broken prisoners. Their eyes dull, their bodies thin. The hunters passed by them with no care. To them, slaves were nothing but tools. The man's jaw tightened. Rage burned in his chest, but he kept silent, for his mission was not yet done. At last, he reached a high tower. Through a barred window he saw her, the child's mother, chained to the wall. Her face pale and tired, but her eyes still burned with strength. She was alive, though beaten. The man's heart grew heavy. He had promised to bring her back, and now he saw what it would cost. Because standing outside her prison were two hunters, taller than the rest, armored with steel and fire. Their weapons glowed red, their eyes cold as ice. They were guardians of the prisoners, strong, merciless, waiting for anyone foolish enough to come. The human stepped back into the shadows. He closed his eyes for a moment, breathing slow. He had fought many enemies, but this was different. He was alone, with no army, no backup, only his knife, his bow, and his will. But inside him burned the memory of the child's voice. Her plea had become his mission. Her hope had become his strength. He gripped his knife tighter. The fortress roared with fire. The guards marched. The machines growled. But he felt no fear, only focus. The mother was close. The enemies were near, and the battle for their freedom was about to begin. The fortress breathed like a living beast. Smoke curled from its towers. Firelight burned in its veins. The human crouched low in the dark corridor, every sound sharp in his ears. Boots marched above. Gears clanged. Voices echoed in a cruel tongue. He moved with the silence of a hunter. His knife resting in his hand. The air was thick with heat, oil, and the stink of blood. He slipped through narrow passages, where shadows drowned the walls. Every few steps he froze, waiting for guards to pass. Their armor rattled. Their weapons hummed with energy. If they saw him, he would be trapped. But they did not. They walked past like blind giants, unaware of the predator in their nest. The human's eyes never stopped moving. He studied every corner, every doorway. He marked the way back, in case the mission turned into a desperate escape. But his goal was clear. The tower, where the mother was kept. That was the heart of his path. He crawled under iron grates, the heat burning his skin. He slid between heavy chains and barrels of fuel. The fortress was alive with machines, glowing with cruel light. Slaves moved in lines, dragging heavy loads, their faces empty. Guards barked at them, striking them when they slowed. The man felt rage, but he forced it down. If he struck now, the alarm would sound, and the child's mother would be lost. He waited until a patrol moved away. Then he crossed the open hall, footsteps soft as whispers. Every muscle was trained, every breath controlled. He reached a staircase, twisting upward like a black serpent. Slowly, step by step, he climbed. The higher he went, the louder the fortress roared. Engines rumbled, chains clashed, screams echoed, yet he kept moving. His eyes locked on the path ahead. At the top, he reached the tower. 2 hunters stood guard outside the cell. They were larger than normal soldiers, armored with thick plates of steel. Their helmets shone with red eyes. Their weapons burned with deadly heat. They stood like statues, unblinking, unmoving, but the human knew they were deadly. He studied them, every detail, every weakness. He could not fight them both in the open. He would need the shadows. He stepped back into the darkness. His hand reached for a loose chain hanging on the wall. With a sharp tug, he pulled it free. The sound loud in the corridor. The guards turned, their helmets glowing as they marched to investigate. The human vanished deeper into shadow. When the first guard passed the corner, he struck. His knife slid under the armor, finding flesh. The guard gasped, fell heavy to the ground. The second turned quickly, weapon raised. But the man was faster. He slammed into the guard, driving the blade into the gap under the arm. The guard thrashed, striking the wall with burning light. But the human held tight, twisting the knife until the body grew still. The tower was silent again. The 2 guards lay in pools of dark blood. The human dragged their bodies into shadow, covering them with broken cloth. He wiped his blade clean and turned toward the cell. Inside, the child's mother hung from chains, weak but alive, her eyes lifted, filled with shock and hope. The human stepped closer. "I am here for you," he whispered. She tried to speak, but her throat was dry. Only tears fell down her face. He searched the walls, found the lock. It was made of heavy steel, glowing faintly with energy. His knife could not break it. He pulled a small tool from his belt, a piece of old human technology. He pressed it to the lock. Sparks flew. The chains groaned and snapped. The woman fell forward, but he caught her gently. Her body was weak, but her spirit was strong. "You are safe now," he said. But even as the words left his mouth, an alarm echoed. Red lights burst across the tower. Horns wailed. Boots thundered in the halls. The fortress had seen the broken lock. The hunters were coming. The woman clung to him, fear in her eyes. He pulled her close, his voice hard and calm. "We are not finished yet, but we will survive." He lifted her arm over his shoulder. Together they moved from the cell into the shadows. The sound of armored steps grew louder. Voices shouted orders. Weapons hummed with fire. The man's heart pounded, but his face stayed cold. This was no longer infiltration. This was escape through fire. The fortress was awake. The hunters knew he was here, and now the silent shadow had become their enemy. The human gripped his knife tighter. His eyes burned with fury. Every battle scar he carried, every loss he suffered, all of it now fueled him. For the child, for her mother, for freedom. He would fight until his last breath. The tower shook with the sound of approaching soldiers. The woman whispered, "How will we survive?" The man looked at her with steady eyes. "By fighting," he said, and the war inside the fortress began. The fortress roared with the sound of alarms. Red light washed over the black walls. Sirens screamed in every corridor. The human held the weak mother close, her arm over his shoulder. Her breath was shaky, but her eyes were alive. Behind them the chains lay broken, proof of his defiance. The floor trembled as hunters rushed through the halls. Heavy boots struck the iron ground. Weapons burned with deadly fire. The human moved quickly, guiding the mother into the shadows. Every corner glowed with danger. Every sound promised battle. Yet his face was calm, his body strong. A squad of hunters appeared ahead, armored figures marching in lines, their red eyes locked on him, weapons raised. The human pushed the woman behind a broken wall. He drew his bow, an old weapon but deadly in his hands. The first arrow flew, striking a hunter between the armor plates. The second arrow followed, piercing another's throat. The rest shouted, firing bursts of burning light. The wall cracked, sparks flying around him. He rolled aside, his knife flashing. He struck fast, cutting through gaps in armor. One by one they fell, their bodies crashing to the ground. The woman stared in disbelief, her voice a whisper, "You fight like fire." Itself, the man did not answer. He only pulled her to her feet and pushed forward. Every second mattered. The fortress was closing around them. They climbed down narrow stairs, the iron steps shaking with every explosion. Above them voices shouted orders, more hunters swarming like insects. He led her through a chamber filled with prisoners, men and women chained, their eyes empty. When they saw the human, a spark lit in their faces. Some whispered, "Mighty One, help us." The mother's voice trembled, "Can we free them?" The man's eyes hardened. "Not now. If I try, none of us will leave alive." Her face fell, but she nodded, knowing he spoke truth. The chamber doors burst open. More hunters poured inside. The human dragged the woman behind a steel pillar. Shots of burning light cut through the air. He grabbed a fallen hunter's weapon, heavy and strange. He pulled the trigger, and fire roared from the barrel. The hunters screamed as the blast tore through their ranks. Smoke filled the room, red sparks raining like fireflies. He dropped the weapon, too slow for his style. His knife was faster, sharper, his true weapon. They slipped through the smoke into another passage. The fortress howled with fury. Drums beat in the distance. As if the hunters sang for war, the mother staggered, her steps weak, but the human carried her weight, his strength unbroken. He moved with purpose, following the path he memorized. Every shadow, every turn, burned into his mind. At last, they reached a high window overlooking the valley. The walls below were thick with guards. Machines rolled across the gates, engines glowing red. The woman gasped. "There is no way out." The man's eyes narrowed, his voice steady. "There is always a way." He tied a rope from his pack to the iron bars. He smashed the window open with the hilt of his knife. Cold air rushed in, smoke swirling into the night. He lowered the woman first, guiding her down the rope. Hunters shouted below, pointing at the moving shadow. Bolts of fire shot upward, burning the wall around her. The man gritted his teeth, his bow firing arrows into their lines. One by one the hunters fell, buying her time. When she reached the ground, he leaped after her. His boots hit the earth with force. Rolling into cover, the hunters charged, dozens of them. The human fought like a storm, his knife flashing, his fist striking. Every move was sharp, precise. Fueled by fire in his soul, the mother picked up a fallen weapon. Weak but brave, she fired at the enemy, covering his side. Together they carved a path through the sea of steel. Suddenly, the ground shook. A massive machine rolled from the fortress gates. Its body was black iron, its weapons glowing. The mother cried out, "We cannot fight that." The man's eyes burned, his voice calm. "We do not fight it. We outsmart it." He grabbed a chain from the battlefield. He sprinted toward the machine. Arrows flying past his head. He climbed its side, slipping between burning gears. The hunters inside shouted, but he was faster. He drove the chain into the gears, twisting it tight. The machine roared, its body shaking. Then, with a scream of metal, it collapsed. Fire burst from its chest. The hunters inside crushed. The blast lit the valley like a second sun. The human landed beside the mother, pulling her away from the flames. Her eyes were wide with awe. "You are truly mighty," she whispered. He only shook his head, his eyes fixed on the shadows ahead. "We are not safe yet." They ran together into the valley. Behind them the fortress burned with fury. Drums thundered, horns wailed. The hunters poured out in endless numbers, but the human did not stop. He carried the mother. Guided by fire in his soul, every step was survival, every breath defiance. He had saved her. But the true escape was only beginning. The valley stretched before them, dark and deadly. The hunters gave chase, their voices echoing like demons. The human looked at the mother, her face filled with fear. "Hold on," he said, his voice steady as stone. "No matter what comes, I will not let you fall." And so, in fire and shadow, the rescue turned into escape. One human against an army. One promise against chains. The fortress behind them raged like a wounded beast. But the humans were burned brighter. The fight was not finished. The war had only begun. The Black Valley echoed with the sound of pursuit. Hunters shouted in their harsh tongue, their boots striking the ground like war drums. The mother leaned on the human, her breath heavy but her spirit unbroken. Every step was pain for her. Yet she did not stop. Beside them the world glowed with fire and smoke. The fortress raging behind like a beast denied its prey. The human moved with calm strength, his eyes sharp as steel. He guided them through rocks and shadows, always a step ahead of the enemy. Arrows flew past, bursts of burning light cut the night, but none struck him. He shielded the mother with his body, his blade flashing when a hunter came too close. Every strike was fast, clean, final. The hunters fell one by one, but still they came, endless. Through the chaos, a small voice called. "From the hills, mighty human." The man turned and saw the child, hidden among broken stones, her eyes wide with fear, her hands trembling. She had waited, just as he told her. Now she ran forward, tears shining as she saw her mother alive. "Mother," she cried, her voice breaking. The woman reached out weakly, her face filled with relief. "My child," she whispered, as they fell into each other's arms. For a moment, the human stood, silent, watching them. He had fought through shadows, through blood, through fire, and here was the reward, a mother and child together again. His chest felt heavy, not with sorrow this time, but with something forgotten, hope. The moment did not last. The hunters roared behind, their horns echoing across the valley. The man turned quickly, his voice firm. "We must move." The girl nodded, wiping her tears. Together they followed him into the hills. The path was steep, filled with jagged stone and thorn, but above it stretched the open sky, dark yet free. They climbed through the night, the hunters chasing but slower now. The fortress fires faded behind, glowing faint in the distance. When the first light of dawn broke, they reached the ridge of the hills. The land beyond was wide and green, touched by golden sun. It was the first beauty the girl had seen since the storm began. She pointed with wonder, her small voice rising. "Look, mother, the world is still alive." The woman smiled weakly, her hand resting on her daughter's cheek. The human stood behind them, silent, but his eyes softened. For hours they walked across the fields, the hunters far behind. Finally they reached a hidden cave, a place safe from sight. The man built a fire, its glow warm against the stone. The mother lay close to it, resting, her chains finally gone. The girl curled beside her, holding her hand, as if never to let go again. The human sat apart, sharpening his knife, his eyes on the cave entrance, listening to every sound outside. Even in safety, his body never rested. The mother spoke softly, her voice carrying gratitude. "You risked everything for us. Why? You did not know us, yet you gave your strength." The man paused, his hand still on the blade, his eyes distant, filled with shadows of the past. "I once had a daughter. I could not save her, but tonight, I saved someone else's child. Maybe that is enough." The woman's eyes filled with tears, but she did not press him further. The girl looked up at him, her small voice firm. "You are more than human. You are our hero." The man shook his head slowly. "I am only a man, but sometimes, a man must choose to fight, not for himself, but for others." The girl smiled, her belief unbroken. "To me, you are mighty. To me, you are hope." The fire cracked, filling the silence. Outside, the wind carried faint echoes of drums. The hunters had not stopped. They would search. They would march. The war was not finished. The human knew this, his eyes burning as he stared into the flames. This was only the beginning. He whispered, his voice low, but filled with steel. The child and her mother fell asleep beside the fire, safe for the first time in many nights. The human stood at the cave mouth, his cloak heavy on his shoulders. The dawn painted the horizon red, the land wide and endless. Somewhere out there, the hunters planned their next strike. Somewhere out there, chains waited for the weak. But here, in this small cave, hope had been born again. He placed his knife back in its sheath, his eyes on the rising sun. The bond between him, the child, and the mother was sealed in fire and blood. They were no longer strangers. They were survivors, bound by trust. And though he did not say it, the girl's words lived in his heart. To her, he was mighty, and perhaps, for the battles yet to come, that would be enough.